distance that we've come in taking kids and placing them in foster care. One of the things that I have concerned and want to make sure that we're considering is when we take kids, and I know in California they've had some lawsuits over what was considered warrantless taking of kids. I want to make sure that we're in our protocol that we're addressing that issue of it is a serious matter when we take those kids. And in talking to law enforcement and to people, it seems like well, we got always look out for the kids. Well, if it ends up that it was an unsubstantiated and there was no cause and we took kids, then the state's actually the perpetrator of taking those kids. And we need to make sure in our protocols that we're addressing the issues of warrantless taking. And I hope that is in our discussion that we're looking at when an investigator goes and investigates. Is that part of the process now? And is your supervisors that you all are bringing on board, which I think is an excellent idea of bringing in another set of eyes, is that one of the things they're looking at? Because if they've gone to a judge and said, we want a warrant, and the judge has said, I'm not going to give you a warrant, that ought to give us some cause. Is that part of the protocol?
Right, so that's part of, talked about levels of approval on removals, and then as we hire these additional people this year, that will be part of their job to do a removal review to ensure that we're making good decisions at removal and that we're being consistent. The HCA report does talk about the issues related to removals, and they call them questionable removals. One of those issues is not just that we took it that it was unsubstantiated, but were we able really to work with the family before we removed? And what we saw is when we were in the war room is, did our workers have the capacity due to caseloads to really get in there and work with the family? And the answer was no. So if they couldn't get in there and work with the family, they didn't feel like the child could safely remain in the home. So that's where your home visiting comes in, your nurture and expansion of the parenting programs to get some support to our workers to get services that are effective in the home to try and prevent removal.
Okay, so I guess my question goes back to, is the warrantless removal constitutional would be number one that we need to get answered. The other was, I think, some communication. Senator Clark and I was meeting with some of our local law enforcement, and there seems to be some question on whether when law enforcement stops a vehicle and there's a child in that and they're going to arrest the parents, on whether or not that law enforcement has to take the child and automatically put them, or can they place them, can they call a family member, grandma or grandpa, and say, hey, we're taking your kid, you need to come get your grandchild. Can they do that? Can local law enforcement do that? And if they can, is that being communicated to them, or is it the understanding for some law enforcement that once they pull over a car and they have to arrest the parents, that child in the car has to go into the system?
Okay, and can I start back on the first question? Maybe I didn't understand. When I thought you were saying warrantless, like no merit removals, were you saying warrantless, like they don't go to a judge and get a warrant to remove?
I am.
Like okay. I'm sorry.
Because if you knock on my door and a police officer, and you tell me you're with the state and you've got a police officer with you, I assume, because I don't have anything to hide, I assume I just have to lay you in and I have to answer your questions. And I have to do that without counsel or anything else. So, I've come to that conclusion that I encourage people not to do that until they know what they're doing, until they know how the ball game's played. But the question comes back is looking at some lawsuits that are being settled out of other states, California in particular. I think one was, I was looking at was like $800,000, one was millions of dollars in settlements where the judge ruled that the kids were taken without a warrant.
So
that's my question.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, I wasn't with you. You're probably wondering why I wasn't making sense.
No, I appreciate the fact that you're here. You're not feeling well.
So warrant in Arkansas, if a family, if our investigator knocks on the door and the family does not allow us in, But we believe that there's a safety risk to the child. We go get what's called an order of investigation, which is a very similar process to going to get a warrant, because we do have to file a petition with the judge, submit a sworn affidavit with that petition, and then the judge can choose whether or not to give us that order of investigation, which we would then get with law enforcement and execute that order of investigation, you know. But yes, the family does have an option when we show up to the door on, if they say, no, you cannot come in my house, we have no mechanism by which to force our way into the house without going to get an order of investigation. Under Arkansas law, which is consistent with our federal authority under child welfare, we exercise a 72-hour hold if we believe that a child is in immediate danger, and then we submit a sworn affidavit to the court, and the court can either choose to sign off on it, or they say, you did not have probable cause to remove that child, I'm not signing an order of custody, so then we would have to return the child. There may be, and I'm not familiar with the numbers, but there may be other states that have to go to court before they can remove a child. I would just say that if we were looking to go that direction, it would concern me, because there may be children that we're standing there and the child is in immediate danger, and it's a Saturday night, and there's no way that we're finding a judge to get an immediate removal order until Monday.
And having worked in county government for 20 years, when a law officer beats down a door because they've got a shooting going, or there's drugs or something else, and there's not a, they find cocaine in the room and everything else, there's not a, you don't need to have more investigation to know if that child's welfare is in. I think my concern is when it's not apparent and there's not a collaborating evidence, there's just somebody called the hotline, turned them in, and so to protect themselves, we take kids, because it's a bad thing if you were charged with investigation and it ends up that something was going on and you did take the kids, and that's equally concerning considering the number of true findings that we found are overturned. So.
Right, and there again, going back to Senator Cooper, our removal decision should not be based on that true finding. It should be based on an assessment of whether the child is in immediate danger. And I don't think I answered your second question about police officers and when they arrest someone and whether they have to immediately call DHS. The only time that police officers have to call DHS for assistance is if there's some reason to believe that there's child maltreatment. So if an officer, I'll just give an example, if an officer does pull someone over on a traffic stop, but the car is full of methamphetamine and it's a 2-year-old and they arrest mom, then the police officer should call our on call and let us assess the situation. If the police officer pulls over a car and arrests mom because of hot checks and there's still a 2-year-old in the back seat, if mom, the arrest was not related to child maltreatment, the mother could call a friend or appropriate relative to come get that child. It would not be the police officer placing with the relative. It would be mom using her parental discretion, because she would be, without any additional information, it's just hot checks. Mom would be appropriate to place child with a friend or appropriate relative.
And DWI, same thing?
Now that's kind of a different circumstance, because if you get a DWI and you're driving small children, then you put those children at risk, and we may need to assess whether those children are safe once mom gets back out of jail.
Thank you.